Happy day everybody, my name is Jeremy and this is Barbecue Elementary. And today I'll be using an ingredient I've never even seen in person before to make some Faygo Rock and Rye glazed baby back ribs. And I'm pairing them with a refreshing tiki-style Faygo Swizzle, all while trying my best to make it gourmet. Let's go. A few weeks ago, one of y'all reached out to me to ask a very important question. Have I tried Faygo Rock and Rye? And the answer was simple. Heck no. So I did a little research, and that took me down a deep, interesting hole. But the gist of it was I needed to try this mystery beverage from Detroit and see if I could do something fun and new with it. So a big thank you to Mike. Thanks for the inspiration, and a big shout out to your son. I really hope his recovery is going well. And I will say that this recipe went a little off the rails from the one you sent, but you know me, I just had to try and do something a little weird. But I hope you enjoy what I came up with. I started the whole process by taking the membrane off of the bone side of these baby back ribs, even though there wasn't a lot of it, which is a first for me, and then I seasoned them with Heath Ryle's competition rub. Because I'm now team no binder for ribs, I won't be using one. If you're interested in why, I made an experiment video a couple weeks back that I think does a pretty good job laying out why not. I went ahead and laid it down pretty thick, just make sure not to forget the edges. I usually mention that you can use whatever seasoning you like, but if you're going to be copying this glaze, I'd keep it pretty simple. And this rub is exactly that, simple and very good. Once everything looked nice and even, I let it sit for about 30 minutes. While it was resting, I cleaned up the Traeger a little bit before preheating the wood pellet burning oven to 250 degrees. I will say that using my offset last week was super fun, but it did make using my Traeger for a midweek cook feel so much easier. I think from now on, when I'm trying something I've never done before, I'll use the Traeger so I can focus on the recipe a bit more, and when I have things a little more dialed, I'll use the offset or the Weber kettle. Once the robot smoker came up to temp, I laid the ribs down and bunched them up a little bit. I try and always do this to kind of puff up the meat between the bones for a better bite at the end. Is this something y'all do? Leave a note in the comments if so, or if you think it's a silly practice, let me know. Once the ribs were sorted, it was time to finally break open and try the star of the show for this cook, Faygo Rock and Rye. Like I mentioned, this isn't something we have here in Colorado, so I did have to order it, which I don't think I've ever done for a soda, but it is essentially like a cherry vanilla cream soda, almost, but not quite like Big Red if you've ever had it. So it should add amazing color and flavor for the various applications I have planned for it. Besides drinking it, the first thing I wanted to do was to reduce it by itself to turn it into a Faygo syrup for the tiki cocktail I planned to pair with the ribs. While that simmers a while, I also threw a can into a squirt bottle with a little apple cider vinegar for the spritz. To reduce into a syrup, all I had to do was simmer on medium-low heat for about 20 to 25 minutes until the Faygo had a maple syrup-like consistency. Then I just threw it into a squeeze bottle to put into the fridge for later. I'll admit this was a little overkill for what I got out of it, but my philosophy is go all the way or stay home. After the first hour of the cook, it was time to check in on the ribs and give them a little Faygo break. If you know, you know. I made sure to do this about every 30 minutes off camera. With about 30 minutes left before the wrapping stage, I started working on the glaze. I began by adding 1 can of Faygo, of course, then about a quarter cup of my new secret ingredient, Tamarind puree. This is going to give the ribs a crazy brightness and a unique flavor because tamarind has that tangy, almost citrusy edge that'll balance all the sweetness from the soda and the savory of the rub. Then a quarter cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of ketchup, and then I stirred all the ingredients together. With about 30 minutes left on the first stage of the cook, I gave it one more spritz and the temps and color were starting to look really good. After about 20 minutes of simmering on medium-low heat, the glaze was nice and thick and glossy and ready to come off the heat. You can tell it's ready to come off the heat because of the way that it is. But I did keep it in the oven on warm until I was ready to use it. After exactly 3 hours, the ribs had that perfect red mahogany and the temperature had hit 162 degrees, so they were ready to wrap. I kept it pretty simple with a few butter pats on the bottom with a bead of honey, as well as a few butter pats on the bones with another bead of honey. Things did get a little funky though when I made a little steam bag out of one of the sheets of aluminum foil and poured 3/4 of a can of Faygo in. This is a little trick I saw on Grillin' with Dad. If you haven't checked out any of his videos, here's a link to them right here. He's really amazing, especially his short form content, and I've learned a lot from him. After all of the liquid I could get into the bag without it gushing out was in, I used a second layer of foil to seal the deal and act as an extra layer of protection before I threw them back onto the smoker for another 2 hours. Just make sure to fold as tight as you can get it without puncturing anything or spilling any of the liquid contents, and you'll be good to go. After those 2 hours were up and the temps were about 204-205 degrees, it was time to put on the glaze. All you need to do here is unwrap and flip the ribs back over, and while leaving everything sitting on the grill, apply the glaze with a brush, mop, or just pour it all over until they're completely covered, and then leave it in the smoker for another 30 minutes to an hour. I myself will typically use a brush for consistency and minimal waste, especially because I typically want to make sure to keep some extra to dip or apply later. I also think it helps to use a brush over a mop for stickier glazes like this one with a higher sugar content, but let me know in the comments what method you like to use. Are you a mopper? Are you a brusher? Or do you just like to pour it all on? While the glaze was setting up, I was ready to get my cocktail ready, and this was a pretty fun one. I started by juicing some limes, which reminds me, don't use pre-juiced lime juice from plastic limes, and if you do use pre-juiced lime juice from plastic limes, then get bent. I added 3/4 of an ounce of that freshly squeezed lime juice, followed by 3/4 of an ounce of our Faygo reduction syrup. Then I went ahead and added an ounce of overproof rum. This one is from Puree. And then I added another ounce of aged rum. This is a 12-year from Appleton Estate. Then after 2 to 3 dashes of bitters, I added some ice up until the cup was about half full and gave it a long stir until my fingers got cold. Then lastly, I added some more crushed ice till it was making a small dome above the top of the glass and garnished with a lime wheel and a sprig of mint that I beat up for a second. And that's about it. A really simple, fun tiki drink with a Faygo twist. You could replace the Faygo with Demerara syrup if you'd like, but you know I had to stay on theme. Now, back to the ribs. After about 45 minutes, the glaze had really tacked up nicely and they were ready to come off the smoker, plate, and start the grating process. This cook was really fun. It's obviously always easier on the Traeger, but the glaze, the process of wrapping, and the seasoning went really well, so I'll give the prep and cooking portion a B. And as far as the looks are concerned, I'll give them a C-. Although the color and shine were amazing, I mean, just look at these. There wasn't really a ton of pullback from the bones that I can typically achieve, so I took a huge chunk off of the score for that. But looks can only get you so far. It was time to cut these up and get into the taste and texture. My first note is that they weren't as juicy as I was expecting them to be with the temps and times that I hit, so I was a little bit disappointed in that. Probably not my best rib cook ever, but let me see about the taste. The first thing that hit me when I finally bit into the rib was how amazing the sauce was. It was so tangy, almost like a sweet, semi-fermented fruit, and the low notes of cherry and vanilla from the Faygo came through so well. The glaze was definitely the hero, because the ribs would have probably been a little blah without it. So as far as the taste of the ribs go, I'll give them a C-. Even though the glaze was really doing something for me, the ribs just kind of fell flat altogether. Now on to the cocktail. The funkiness of the rum went really well with the rib glaze, and the acidity of the lime, as always, was a nice complement to the richness of the ribs, and although it wasn't super powerful, the Faygo syrup was a really nice addition. This was a really fun and easy cocktail, so I'll give it a B+. So altogether, these ribs and drink pairing get a C+ average. But even though this is a pretty average score, I would still recommend trying this glaze out, as well as use the Rock and Rye in other applications. I sure will, because I think it's actually an elite barbecue ingredient. So don't sleep on it. And as always, thanks a million for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't to follow me along on my adventures through Barbecue Elementary.